everyone, to a very special episode of Superhero Stuff You Should Know. This is Ben, and with me, as usual, is...
Andrew, everybody. Thanks for joining us here today. And we've got...
a very special guest with us, one of the, basically, one of the major writers who's responsible for the formation of a lot of the elements that we take for granted. That's part of the Batman character. He brought back Hugo Strange, brought back Deadshot, created Silver St. Cloud, so many different contributions. Also, one of the greatest Joker stories of all time that's sort of responsible for the modern version of Joker, and that's The Laughing Fish. So please welcome Steve Englehart.
Hi.
Hey, thank you for joining us. It's such an honor.
It's a big honor. We have talked a lot about the Dark Detective arc. I know you call it Dark Detective. We sort of I grew up with it as Strange Apparitions because of the trade paperback. But
the name that never made any sense to me, but that's what they called it.
It's just because of Hugo, right? He's strange. He's a ghost.
Yes.
Yeah. But before we dive into that, I do want to ask about one of my other favorites that you were involved in. I know you weren't the only. You can explain in terms of the different contributors on this one, but Night of the Stalker is also one that I really love. So how did this come together?
Well, when I moved to New York in order to work in comics, which you had to do in those days, I was never really thrilled with New York. And so I wanted to move back up to Connecticut where I had gone to college. And Sal Amendola was another young guy trying to break into comics. And I think Dick Giordano sort of put us together, introduced us. So Sal and I were roommates up in Connecticut. And he and his brother, I believe, came up with this story. They consulted with Neil Adams, who gave them whatever input he had. I really don't know. But only at that point did Sal come to me and he said, I'd like you to dialogue this story. I was just getting started writing, but, we were roommates, so he knew basically where my head was and so on and so forth. And so he asked me to dialogue it. And the point of it was that the Batman never says anything. And of course, when I dialogued it, I wrote a couple panels where the Batman says something. Archie Goodwin, who was the editor, came back and took those out, fixed it. But so it was basically, I put the words on the page, but it was Sal and his brother and Neil who basically created this story.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. And it was the dialogue, and was it also the narration? Because I do love the part at the end about how he is, still that child, that traumatized child from years ago.
Yeah. Well, that was the point of their story, and mm-hmm. I was happy to run with it. But yeah, all the words are mine.
Awesome.
And a few that didn't get in because Archie fixed
it. Do you happen to remember what those might have been, or what, sort of along the lines of what those would have been?
No, I really don't. I mean, I'd have to look at the story and try to see where I might have put something, but even then I wouldn't remember what it was that I did.
Gotcha.
This was very early in my career, and mm-hmm. It all went away. I mean, that stuff went away, so it's like I have no mm-hmm. record of it.
Gotcha. All right.
Well, Ben, this is like one of your favorites, if not your favorite, right? Single story?
Mm-hmm. One of my favorite single stories, yes.
One of.
Yeah, I was happy to be associated with it, but it is, it's very definitely those guys who conceived it.
Gotcha.
You've probably heard over the years, this is also Michael Uslan's favorite single issue too, I believe. He's said that before. Mm-hmm. Have you heard that? Are you aware of that?
I'm not aware of that, but...
Okay. I think he said that before. Before we go to the next question, I was wondering, what were do you know, I guess it seems like they had the beats sort of written before you were there, but did you know the influences for this story? Was it like any parts of a movie or another comic or anything like that?
I don't connect it in my own head to anything else. I don't remember seeing another comic, a movie, or anything that was connected to it. But beyond that, no, it was just Sal said, we have this story. It's all, I think he probably drawn it. And he just needed somebody to dialogue it. So I knew as much as I needed to know to write it. But how they got to that point, I don't know.
Okay, got it. All right, cool. Okay, so your first Dark Detective run inspired two episodes of Batman the Animated Series, The Strange Secret of Bruce Wayne and The Laughing Fish.
All right.
What were your thoughts on these adaptations?
I thought they did a really good job. I mean, they particularly The Laughing Fish was pretty much verbatim. I mean, they just took my script and drew pictures for it. So I was pleased that they did that. I mean, it was in order to fill out their time. Obviously, they had to merge it with a Denny O'Neil story at the end. So it didn't exactly play the same way, but no, I thought Batman animated series was a great series.
Yeah, for sure.
It was really good all around, pretty much.
Yeah. One thing that I love with both the original, well, not just the original arc, but all of the entire sort of Dark Detective run that you have, as well as your other story in, I think it was Legends of the Dark Knight with Got a Date with an Angel, which sort of just an early version.
Yeah.
I love exploring sort of Bruce's love life in this, and so could you talk about why you like to explore this aspect of the character?
Well, there were a number of things I was trying to do when I took over the Batman in the detective run, first detective run. One was to get back the stuff that had been lost from the original concept, the darkness, the weirdness. The first 2 years of Batman stories in detective were really, fun stories, good, good old timey by this time, even then, comic book stories. But the whole darkness, the whole creature of the night, the whole monsters, and the psychopathic Joker, all that had been lost, and I wanted to get that back. But I am always interested in who are the people inside the costume. I mean, I wasn't writing Batman so much as I was writing Bruce Wayne, who is the Batman, but also he's a guy, and he's supposedly running an international empire of business, and he's supposedly a playboy. And all that stuff is, what they did DC in the 50s and stuff with Lois Lane and Superman, same Vicky Vale over here. It's like, oh yeah, well, I don't think they were worried about people thinking any of these guys were gay, although there was that Wortham and those guys thought that Bruce and Dick might have been gay, but I don't think DC was so much worried about that. It's just like, well, yeah, he's a playboy, so he's got a girlfriend who doesn't show up very much, but but I thought I was interested in who this guy was. I mean, his parents were killed. He did all this kind of stuff. Now he's the Batman. And, how is he doing that? How is he holding that together, making all of that fit together? And so I had always thought, in reading those comic books in the 50s with Lois Lane and Vicky Vale and all that, it's like the heroes would always get embarrassed about sex. And even as a kid, I thought, that's not how grown-up people do that,
The opposite.
And so I felt it was all very family-friendly, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But I thought I really wanted to make Bruce Wayne an adult man. And so on the one hand, I'm bringing back all the ambiance and weird characters and stuff from the 40s, 30s even. But on the other hand, I wanted to move the thing forward. I wanted to, do something youthful with Batman. And so Silver St. Cloud, as a woman who was strong enough to hang out with Bruce Wayne, had enough on the ball to hang out with Bruce Wayne, had her own life, so she didn't have to worry where was he every night, because she had her own things going on. All of that came together, and that's why very definitely, although under the comics code, Bruce and Silver were having sex. They had this adult relationship, which eventually led to her being able to recognize his chin. Right? I mean, so all of those things were part and parcel of what I wanted to do. And of course, I was doing it all theoretically in 7 issues. That's what originally the schedule called for. The early ones sold well enough that they added an 8th issue. But I thought that's the only time I'm going to get to write Batman. Is up to that point, I had been a Marvel writer. Batman was my favorite superhero. Always loved the Batman, even in the 50s, because Dick Sprang artwork, because it looked so weird. But I thought, this is my one shot, so I'm going to do everything I can possibly do to make a good Batman story, something that, that I would really feel I could be happy with, that I'd done something good for this character that I liked so much. I'm going on here. You can shut me up at any time.
No, keep going.
Please keep going.
Please.
As it happened, I started out doing it with Walt Simonson and Al Milgrom. And we were doing it Marvel style, which is where I would say, here's the story, and then Walt would lay it out, and then Al would ink it. But I was under a time limit. This is all part and parcel of it. But when I left Marvel, I thought, I'm going to take a break from comics. And my wife had traveled in Europe before I met her. But by the time this came around, she was my wife. And I thought, well, that sounds cool. I'd like to go to Europe for a while. That'd be fun. So we, started making arrangements. And then Jeanette Kahn called from DC. She'd just been appointed publisher. And she was under the gun to do something because the books weren't doing all that well, DC. And she tried to hire John Buscema and me. And Stan outbid her for John Buscema, but he let me go. So I said to her, she wanted me to write the Justice League. This is all going to come to a point at some point here, but she wanted me to come over and do the Justice League. And I said, yeah, I'll do that for the time that I have remaining. But I also want to write the Batman in and of himself. And she said, okay. She wanted me to come over there. So I wrote the JLA. Had a good time writing the JLA. But I really wanted to do this one time only chance to write the Batman. That said, I had only so much time, and Walt and Al were, doing it on a sort of more normal schedule, and I was running out of time. So I eventually ended up writing most of all of the issues out after a certain point as script in advance, which is the traditional old school, and now the current, once again, the current way of doing it, which is just panel 1. Here's what's happening. Here's what they say. Panel 2. Here's what's happening. Here's what they say. And I handed in those scripts, and I had no idea who was going to draw them, because Julie, I know, was getting a little unhappy with the time lag thing. I can't really imagine, and there's nobody to ask, and I didn't ask at the time, so what can I say? But it's hard to imagine that you would bounce Walt Simonson for anything other than just time pressure, And in any event, I handed in all the scripts. I left the country. I traveled around Europe. I had no idea who was going to draw them. And it was 6 months later that I got a package in Mallorca where we were spending the winter. And it had all the issues in it. And so for the first time, I saw Marshall Rogers and Terry Austin, what they had done with it. And I'm not traditionally religious, but I quite honestly said, thank you, God, when I looked at it. Wow, somebody up there likes me to have put that together. So I didn't meet Marshall or Terry till I came back from Europe, et cetera, et cetera. But as it turns out, as I said, I wanted to do like the best Batman that I could do. So did Marshall and Terry. They were both big Batman fans, and they wanted to, do everything they could do on the art end. And so the whole package, was just sort of everything just worked for that. But I've said, over the years, the odds were it was going to be just a couple of journeymen doing the art at DC in those days, because everybody who had been good had gone to Marvel, and here came Marshall and Terry in the door, but there was no way to know that. Mm-hmm. So the scripts would have been exactly the same. My scripts were scripts, right? But if they'd been drawn by lesser artists, people wouldn't. I've learned over the years, people are not going to go, "Oh, the story's really good, but the art didn't quite." They'll just go, "Oh, the comic wasn't everything that we would have liked it to be." So again, it was very lucky that I, got the perfect guys to draw this thing. And so, what I wanted out of it actually happened.
Awesome.
That's a long answer. I probably blew right through half your questions, but
no, that's good.
It's good. It's good. We, I did want to ask too. We didn't have this in here, but it did occur to me. For me, when I'm going back into the canon, was this one of the first times that in Batman comics or Detective Comics where it was sort of an ongoing serialized story as opposed to separate stories? Because Denny O'Neil and Neil Adams had their run, but it was like there was the Ra's al Ghul stories. There were like 3 of them, and then everything else was kind of separate from that when they collaborated.
Yeah, I think so. Again, the story that I wanted to tell required more than one issue. It had to be done in issue-sized bites, It even started with less than an issue-sized bite because we had the history of Dr. Phosphorus as a second story in the back, although you could call that the whole book. But again, I wanted to get more in depth with the characters, and that took time, that took space. Mm-hmm. And again, as I say, it was originally going to be 7 issues, and I plotted the thing for 7 issues. And then when they gave me an 8th issue, that allowed some of the scenes then at the back end of the run to breathe a little bit more. I had extra space where, Bruce and Silver could go to lunch and talk, or, this, that, or the other thing. Which again, really felt good when I was doing it. It's like I had a story, it was in 7 issues, it would have made sense, and, blah, blah, blah. But having that extra space just sort of allowed everything to just, as I say, breathe, to be more completely realized because I had space for it. Again, just a lucky break. But at the end, I felt that I had done what I wanted to do. I did feel that it was a pretty good Batman story.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, widely considered, and I agree, one of the greatest runs on the character. And it's like I told you when we met at WonderCon, I read it every year.
Was there a reason you chose Silver St. Cloud, or was that she was just the woman at the time that was with Bruce Wayne, or?
Well, that's his creation.
Okay, I'm sorry. Yeah. Got
it. Vicky Vale, whatever that woman,
she's not,
whoever she
not
was,
for you.
We hadn't yet gotten. That was sort of kicked off. The whole thing of making Batman an adult sexual man has then obviously led to the Catwoman and so on and so forth. Catwoman was not a romantic counterpart in those days. So the only girlfriends that he had were like lame ciphers. So that's why I created Silver St. Cloud. I wanted, and again, she's not a superhero. And I thought, because I was looking at the side of Bruce that wasn't the Batman, in addition to the part that was.
So were you, at the offices, were you like, I'm creating this woman so Bruce can have sex?
Yeah, pretty much.
That's kind of how it went? Okay.
Well, the editor was Julie Schwartz, right? He was the editor on JLA too. So I was working with him pretty much exclusively on a regular basis. I did a few random things for DC in there somewhere, but I mean, Julie was a cool guy. He was well known for being the creative force behind his books. I mean, he was the guy who would call in the writers and say, "Well, I've got this idea. Let's work it out." And the writers were used to that. When I came in, um, again, Jeanette came to me and said, "I want you to do what she said originally was, I want you to do with the Justice League what you did with the Avengers. I want you to give them personalities, and I want you to have more story depth, and so on and so forth." That's a different story what I did with the JLA, but um, I, I said to her, the only way I can do that is to do it my way. I mean, that's how I've been working at Marvel, doing the stuff that you're hiring me to try to do the similar thing to. Um, and if it's for Julie, Julie's well known for being the one being in charge, and she said, "I'll take care of it." So I don't know what Julie was told or what Jeanette said to him. You know, probably something along the lines of, "I'm the publisher now, and this is what I want you to do." But in any event, if he was at all bent out of shape by that, he never indicated it. He was totally helpful.
Okay.
He was,
Okay.
he was just there to sort of facilitate my doing what I did. And the one thing I remember along that line is when Hugo Strange got beaten to death.
Mm-hmm.
I had written that to be on camera, to be visible. And Julie said, "Well, I think it would be better if we did this off camera." I'm like, "Yeah, okay, sure, that sounds good." So Julie was just looking to, wherever he could help, wherever he could, make things work better, which again was not his reputation, but he, that's the way that this was going down. And again, I hate it to sound like he was sort of stuck in a box, because I didn't want to do that to him. I just wanted, to do what it is that she wanted me to do, and that's, whatever. So it wasn't like me telling Julie what to do at all, but I mean, neither was he telling me what to do. So,
Gotcha.
So you wanted to make it darker, bring it back to old school
yeah,
Batman and darker, and so there was pretty much no pushback from anybody. It was like, "Oh, yep, go ahead, do that, please." Is that pretty much how?
yeah. It was, well, I mean, I, comics were only comics in those days, and I mean, the story that I tell otherwise is when Roy Thomas at Marvel went up to me and said, "Here, you're writing Captain America now. Do whatever you want to do." It's like that would never happen today, right? Because now
Okay.
he's, there's IP and there's merchandising and there's movies that have to be coordinated, all this kind of stuff. But in those days, there was this book called Captain America, and it wasn't selling, and they wanted me to see what I could do with it, and I found something to do with it, and that, sort of got me going as being a comic book writer. Um, so kind of the same thing that DC at that point, they weren't doing all that well. When Carmine Infantino had been in charge, there were a lot of good books coming out of DC, but Marvel was just, Marvel was steamrolling everybody at that point, and so DC was not doing well. There was even talk in the early '70s about Marvel buying DC, but DC might just sell itself and get out of this business. So there was the same thing with Batman. I mean, it was like she said, "I want you to do this thing for Justice League." I said, "I want to do the Batman." She's like, "Yeah, go for it," And so I had read a number of the really early Batman stories because they'd been reprinted in the back of the Giant issues now and again. But that was only a sampling. So DC couldn't tell you now, but I assume it's somewhere. They had a library where everything that they had ever published had been gathered up in hardcover and, put into books with hardcovers on them. And I said, I would really like to see the first 2 years of Detective Comics. And I remember the response was like, Yeah, I mean, nobody ever asked to see those books. I'm like, yeah, I want to see those books.
Mhm.
So they made me, I read some of them in the office, and then so I could go back to California where I live. I got Xeroxes of all those stories. This was before, they'd reprinted everything, right? The various reprint books. Um, so there was a time there when I was just I was like the only one uh, in the world who sort of had access to all that early stuff. I mean, there must be a few collectors around somewhere it's gone, but um, and I was just reveling in it. I just, I really liked it. When I did our series, I said to the letterer, who would also ink the panel, put the panel borders on, I said, make the panel borders thicker so there'll be more black on the page. If you look at those
Mhm.
early Batman stories, there's a lot of black ink being used there. And I said,
Mhm.
we need more black on the pages. So just you can do that by making the panel borders thicker. Um, that's that's where my head was like, get that pulp atmosphere any way
Right.
I could. So
That's cool. Well, could you share with us how you came to be involved with writing treatments for what would become the Batman '89 movie?
yeah, well, so all that stuff, the original run was 1976, 77, and Michael Uslan said,
Mhm.
I can see how to do adult superheroes for the first time. And so he had done the Swamp Thing movies, and he started trying to do a Batman movie. And I was not involved in that. And I was doing comics, and that was a different world, movies. Um, and then in 1986, I got a call from Jeanette, and she said, they've been trying for 10 years to kind of do what you did, and they just can't get it right, can't get the ambiance right. So would you get involved in this? Um, and I said yes, and it was a typical DC ripoff. I'm sorry to say, but that's what they do. I was offered a flat fee to coordinate the scripts. I only learned much later that totally illegal under Writers Guild of America rules, et
Oh
cetera,
my
et cetera.
God.
Uh,
Yeah.
Gee.
but so everything I did was through Jeanette, and what would happen was she would send me the latest script, and I would go through it, and they were adapting my story. So I was
Mhm.
trying. They were adapting it, but they were doing the thing that superhero movies used to do, which is to have a funny character in there somewhere where you can say,
Mhm.
"See, we're not really serious about this. We're just, it's a
Yeah.
comic book movie, right?"
Mhm.
But with Mr. Luthor in the Superman movies and so forth,
Right.
I mean, it was like there was a comedic element. I didn't want a comedic element in Batman. I didn't see a comedic element in Batman. So I kept taking these scripts and cutting down on the funny reporter that Robert Wool played, and
Ooh.
pumping up the darkness and the adultness of the thing. And I would send that back then, and then I'd get back another script where they sort of done what I wanted, but not exactly, um,
Real quick, this is after Sam Hamm then, because he's the creator of the Alexander Knox character, the reporter you mentioned.
yeah, yeah. It was I.
Gotcha.
If you tell me that, then I've never really I didn't don't remember. They gave me the scripts from all the people
Mhm.
before Sam Hamm who
Oh, so
who had
Tom Mankiewicz,
written
yeah.
who had
Okay.
written their version of the thing, and these are the ones that didn't work,
Mhm.
which is why they came to me. But I was
Mhm.
up to speed on that. There was a Tim Burton version too that he wrote,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
Um, but I wasn't really paying attention. I mean, the name Sam Hamm meant nothing to me, and I wasn't paying
Sure.
attention to whose script it was. I was paying
Mhm.
attention to the script, right? Um,
Of course.
and so that's I believe the term would be I doctored the scripts, and after a while they said, that's good. I spoke of DC and their ripoff tendencies, which I'm happy to happy to bring up because um, every script that I worked on and every script from those previous guys, the girlfriend had been Silver St. Cloud. And everything I was working on, it's Silver St. Cloud and it's Boss Thornton. It wasn't until the movie came out that I saw that they had changed the names to Vicky Vale and Boss Grissom. And I said to them, what's happened here? And they said, we did that because then we don't have to pay you royalties. They were quite, they were like, yeah, that's, I've had over the years, I don't know if you guys have run into it, and I don't know if you've had occasion to, but over the years, I've had people now and again do something like that and go, it's just business. Nothing personal, just business. But it didn't endear me, endear them to me, shall we say. So I was, and the other thing was they never asked me and Marshall and Terry to do Batman again, right? I mean, 30 years went by before they did. So we're sitting there and people, in all honesty, people are going, that's sort of a classic Batman thing there. How come you're not doing it anymore? And we're like, because DC doesn't want us to do it. They don't, they're not big on people going, oh, it's an Englehart Rogers Batman. They just want it to be Batman. That's usually inside baseball stuff, but it figures into a lot of what happens here. So, anyway, that's yes. So I tried to make the movie as best I could, and then they did whatever they did.
I mean, were you pretty into the end product, or is too different from your original vision?
It was a lot of it was what I wanted. I mean, I really like Michael Keaton as Batman. I mean, the story that I heard was they went to several big ticket Hollywood guys who said, I don't want to do a whole movie with a mask over my face, So Keaton was kind of the fallback because he had done Beetlejuice with Tim Burton. And so the story I've always heard is that they kind of like couldn't get people that they might have wanted. So then they asked Keaton to do it. But I think Keaton's great because, I mean, you can say, oh, he's not big enough or he's not bulky enough or whatever. We weren't doing suits with muscles in those days, right? But Keaton has a darkness inside him. You can believe that Michael Keaton has got serious secret stuff going on somewhere. And I thought that was great. And Kim Basinger was playing Silver St. Cloud. She looked like Silver St. Cloud. She just had this weird name, Vicky Vale. And then Boss Thorne and the Gotham City government, Boss Grissom. And Jack Nicholson as Joker. I mean, so it's like there was most of it was my stuff one way or another. We still had the funny reporter, and there was, this other stuff. So it wasn't as pure as I might have liked it to be, but in general, I liked it quite a bit. I just in the middle of the movie when they started calling this woman Vicky Vale, that definitely was like a kick in the teeth. But as far as the movie goes, I thought it was good. And then, well, I mean, that's the only one I was involved with. I mean, the Penguin, Catwoman one had the right people in it, but again, it didn't have the right vibe, I didn't think. And then they just went nuts and became funny stuff again,
Gotcha.
Cool.
To go into your treatments, all right, in the opening of one of the introductions that you wrote for the Strange Apparitions trade paperback, you said that you had argued against including Robin because I know that at the time there was just like it's going to be Joker, Boss Thorne, Silver St. Cloud, Penguin, and Robin, who are all in the original Tom Mankiewicz script, and then they tried to do some variation of that again with the Tim Burton, Julie Hickson treatment. So how different would your treatments have been if they were like, you know
Well, that
what,
was the
do it
thing.
about
I mean,
Robin.
when they came to me and they said, we need you to like work on these scripts, there, what I was handed had all those people you just mentioned in. And I said, kind of goes back to what I said about needing some space in the comics to like really get involved and stuff. I said, if you're going to have the Penguin and the Joker and Robin and the origin story and maybe Robin's origin story and all, I mean, it's like, that's too much. You can't do that. And they said, yeah, that's what we're going to do. Like, okay, well, so the first version had all those people in it, and I think once they saw, I mean, I hope I did a professional job of trying to make that work. But I think once they saw just how busy it was going to be, then they said, okay, we're just going to do Joker, and we're just going to do the people who actually showed up in the movie. So then, we went. Everything after that was the characters that we expected, that we know were there. It was an interesting situation because I never, I wasn't dealing with the movie people directly. I was dealing with Jeanette, who would then pass stuff along. And so there was never a question or occasion where, I could sit down and I could kind of like explain what it is that I wanted to do and why this wouldn't work and so on and so forth. So I would do this and I would send it to her and then she would send it to them and then they would do whatever they do and then we'd go back to her and then it would come to me. And so, as I say, at the end of the day, a lot of stuff that I thought should be there was there. But I, it was at one remove, at a distance. I was having to like move things around, without having the authority or the ability to say, oh, let's sit down over here and we'll talk about it. And here's what I want to do. It's just like, no, can't do it. So.
Gotcha. I don't know if you've browsed online, but a couple of the
two. I wrote two.
You wrote two, or did
one
you write more than
with
two?
Everybody and one without.
So a couple of them. Gotcha. A couple of them. Those two were adapted.
Yeah, no, I know that.
As audio dramas by. I was curious if you had a chance to check those out, and because I have worked, I wasn't involved with those, of course, but because that was before. I think that was before. Oh no, the latest one dropped of the second one recently. But Tim, who runs that channel, is a friend of ours. He's been on our show, and I just thought I would pass that along to you if you hadn't already known about those. Nice. Awesome. I think I actually have one more additional question before we do a quick bathroom break, which is I've read in a previous interview that you kind of have your own opinion in terms of Bruce Wayne's training to become Batman, because like we've seen in the Nolan movie and a lot of sort of the comics that were influential on it, there was this whole journey of Bruce Wayne going around the world to train to become Batman. But from what I remember in this interview, and you can correct me if I'm wrong on this, but I believe that your version of it would be more that he undergoes.
Yeah, the whole thing about traveling around the world, I don't have a problem with that, but that that hadn't occurred to anybody, when I was doing stuff. So it wasn't part of the canon.
Right.
And I did sort of have the idea. I mean, I guess what I picked up, and I'm pretty sure it was hinted at or talked about, back in the early days. I mean, but it was like Bruce taught himself and Alfred helped, and he learned this, that, and the other thing. But I did assume that it all sort of took place somewhere around Gotham. But I don't have a problem with the idea that he traveled around the world and learned interesting things. I mean, I don't think Batman, to the time when I got there, was skilled with swords and stuff like that. But yeah, no, I don't have a problem with that. That's a later concept.
Mm-hmm. I do love the aspect, though, that if he did do a lot of it in the city, he would know the city like the back of his hand, inside and out, by the time he dons the costume, as opposed to my whole thing with, like, I do love the whole going around the world thing too, because that does make, it does make sense. It brings in all these, influences of other aspects into it of martial arts movies. But my thing is, like, when he comes back, he's like, wait, so where's everything again? Because I haven't been back so many years.
New York used to be this magical place, all the movies, all the, stuff. Mm-hmm. It's like you can get anything you want in New York. And the idea that he sort of did it all in his home city, probably going to the East Village at 3 a.m. in order to do this, that all seemed, I mean, Gotham City is a major component in Batman too, right? So the idea of leaving Gotham City in order to get stuff, again, I don't have a problem with it, but it doesn't seem to have the right vibe to it, I guess I might say. That it seems like, yeah, you should have done the whole thing in Gotham City at 3 a.m. in the dangerous parts of town, rather than travel around. But, that's fine.
Nice. Awesome. So we do have some questions from our fans on the $10 Patreon tier, but we will save those after a quick break.
Ads. Yay.
Welcome back, everyone. We are going to resume our questions for Steve Englehart with questions from our $10 Patreon tier. So first one up comes from Jared. I'll have Andrew read it off.
Okay, in general, how did the creation of Silver St. Cloud come about with her personality, backstory, and appearance?
Well, her personality, as I said, was a strong, independent woman, because that seemed like somebody that Bruce Wayne wouldn't want anybody less than that. She couldn't keep his attention if she was less than that. Backstory, I just wanted to give her her own business. When I first thought about her doing convention setups, running conventions, I did not think that she might have a giant typewriter there, but later that worked out. That worked out nicely. And the appearance was pretty much up to Walt. I mean, she first appeared in Walt's second story. And, he made her blonde, made her, look the way she did. And then Marshall really, took that and solidified it, I guess.
Gotcha. Cool. Jared has another question for us as well on Silver St. Cloud, saying, Silver St. Cloud is my favorite love interest of Bruce Wayne / Batman. I was curious if there were any actresses that you would like or have liked to have portrayed her of any film era. Obviously, I'm sure you count Kim Basinger as or having already played her in '89, right. But if there's anyone else who comes to mind.
Well, I mean, I thought Kim Basinger really fit what, she had become through Walt and then through Marshall. She looked like her, right? So, there are a number, there are a number of blonde actresses who could play her. But I mean, Kim Basinger was satisfied me. I haven't really thought about who else could it have been. No.
Satisfying to a lot of people, I would say.
Yeah.
But it's interesting because I've always, and maybe this is just because of the way it was printed in this, but it was kind of, as a kid, I'm just like, well, does she really have silver hair? She must be blonde. And then later on, I'm just like, yeah, maybe she just has it dyed like that. And then now, you, the creator, are saying that she.
Yeah, and actually, I mean, the name, I had to come up with a good name for her. Mm-hmm. And, so I started just thinking about Batman vibes and the silver and the moon, and then clouds in front of the moon. I mean, it's one of those things where when I'm creating stuff, I'm sort of throwing things together and seeing if I can get something that makes sense. And so, I mean, this definitely comes from this sort of silver or moon clouds late at night kind of thing. That's how the name came about.
Nice.
That's cool.
All right, next one comes from Alex.
Okay, so would you say that Hugo Strange is Batman's Moriarty?
Possibly. I mean, I killed him, so he wasn't around long enough. But I know he's come back. So, but exactly all the stuff that he's done over the last 50 years, I'm not entirely sure. Because he's a scientist, he certainly could be. But Moriarty's a big. Those are big shoes to fill.
I mean, to be fair, in Holmes canon, Moriarty does kind of show up in 2 stories and then gets killed off. So you might be onto something there.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I'm not sure that there's anybody in the Batman universe that would qualify as Moriarty, but I suppose Hugo Strange might be as close as you're going to get.
Some would think Ra's al Ghul because he's also got the criminal organization thing, and he's
actually I think you're right. I would go with that.
Gotcha. I do want to say, and Andrew knows where I'm going with this. Hugo Strange is one of my favorite villains, and it's probably because of what you did with this character. Because beforehand, the Bill Finger stuff with the Monster Men, that's kind of cool. It has a nice atmosphere to it, but this predates a lot of the more modern stories of a guy who got really close to just purely breaking Batman, just getting to the point of knowing the true identity, taking over his life. And if anything, Bruce just kind of gets a little bit lucky that he didn't get as far as he did, thanks to Thorne's men taking him and, Dick helping to save him through all of it. But he was a hell of a threat. I think it's because of the story that Hugo Strange is one of my favorites. So thank you for that.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I mean, the original stuff was just Bill Finger Monster Men kind of thing, but it looked good. And when I looked at all those characters from that era, he was the one that jumped out at me as somebody that I could, bring back to make the connection there. In the unpublished stuff, I used Dala the Vampire for a different sort of story, right? But but she didn't fit in what I was trying to do then, and so I didn't use her then. But yeah,
Gotcha. Let's go into those then, because we've got, you were brought back along with Marshall Rogers and Terry Austin for what was called Dark Detective, even though I know you see it as Dark Detective 2. And it's very much the beginning of a new era of new stories until it wasn't, unfortunately. And then you've posted the scripts and the initial pencils for Dark Detective 3, as well as what the outline for Dark Detective 4 would have been, which sounded amazing because it was essentially, from what I read, a 24 style Batman and Silver St. Cloud versus like all of Gotham City villains, which sounds amazing. Which I would have loved to have picked up and read after that. So can you share a bit in terms of like your side of the story of what happened with Dark Detective and so on?
Well, as I said, for 30 years, they didn't want us to do Batman. And then in much the same way that Jeanette Kahn took over and was told she had to do something, then Dan DiDio took over. And Dan DiDio came out to a convention in San Francisco where Marshall and I were. And he, told us how much he loved us and, and really wanted us to get back together and do some Batman stuff. The reason mentioned was that they were coming up with these new movies, the Nolan movies, and they needed product. They needed Batman stories. Well, we were just happy to be asked, after all this time. And we thought, okay, it's a new era. This is going to be good. And it was easy to do, at least for me. I didn't have to think, well, now who was Silver St. Cloud? What was this all? No, I was able to. I am looking pretty weird here because I got the sun's going down where I am. I can't get out of it. How am I supposed to get out of it? So I lost my train of thought. What were we talking about?
Returning to Dark Detective with.
Oh yeah. So they said, yeah, do this again, and I had no trouble coming back and like, okay, yeah, it had in my story sense, it hasn't been 30 years, but I mean, Silver has moved on. She left the Batman. What's going on? Blah blah blah. Gave her the nicest possible boyfriend so that you wouldn't think, oh, this guy's a jerk, and of course Batman's going to take her back. I made sure that Evan Gregory was a good guy. Later I played with that in the unpublished stuff, but so we did these things. We did the best Batman we could do again, in the run, and that was a time when we thought, well, this is a continuation of what we did in the 70s, therefore this should be Dark Detective 2, and that retroactively should be Dark Detective 1. So we did our thing, and then the movies came out, and I started to notice stuff from those stories, comic stories, had been put into the movies. And I'm like, well, you didn't mention that was going to happen, and you're not paying me for it, and yet here I am with stuff that I came up with showing up on the screen. So, I mean, there was a lot more in the Christopher Nolan movies than just, my stuff. I mean, he drew from all over. But, I mean, the whole thing, the costume ball where the Joker strolls in, I mean, the fact that Harvey Dent looked exactly like Evan Gregory, it was clear that we'd been used as source material for the movies. But there it was. I mean, once again, DC's like not going to do the right thing if they can figure out how not to. So, fine. There they were.
Gotcha.
Cool.
I will say one of the things that I have always had an issue with in The Dark Knight was sort of the aspect that a big ongoing storyline for Bruce in that movie is him basically trying to take another man's girl throughout most of it. But because of the fact that Rachel in the movie had already, movie universe had already sort of established, hey, like, we're not going to get together beforehand, and like, they didn't really have much romantic history, as opposed to in your story, like, Bruce and Silver clearly have a very rich history together. And when it's like rekindled, like, I was like, okay, this makes sense. When I was comparing the two stories, this makes a lot more sense in the context of the comic.
Right. Well, I mean, so I never forget that I'm doing Batman, in that it's not superheroes in love. But part of that, I want my characters to be more than just the suits. I want to see Bruce Wayne from the Bruce Wayne side now and again. And so the idea that he would see Silver again, she'd be happy with a different guy, but maybe not exactly. But then, it was like, I wanted to play, I had to continue to play the romantic aspect of the thing. It was not a romance book, but the romance had been established the first time around, and it made no sense. I mean, unless I left her out altogether, there's no way to, like, just ignore that. Mm-hmm. So as you've read my scripts for the third one, etc. You've seen the plot for the fourth one. Mm-hmm. I mean, my Batman, had I been in charge of Batman, I would have definitely worked out more on the ongoing relationship between a woman and a guy who's the Batman, who's got all this stuff that he does. I mean, he's not going to like give it up. Well, that's, you mentioned way back at the beginning, that one shot I did, Got a Date with an Angel. And that's the same kind of deal where he's like, yeah, I can be Batman and I can still continue to be a playboy. And the whole point of Got a Date with an Angel is he learns that he can't, he can't keep that up. But I never saw him, and they never portrayed him as a monk. I mean, theoretically he had girlfriends. He just, he had girlfriends who he could, I guess, see once a month or something, and they'd think, oh, well, that's cool. But I wanted more than that.
Right. So based off what you've said, as well as what I've said in past interviews, in your version of things or version of events, if you had been on the title for a lot longer, like Silver St. Cloud would have become kind of the regular character. She would have been the regular girlfriend, not just for this arc that you were part of.
Yeah, I tend to think that if I was writing it over a period of time, I mean, it wasn't going to be Bruce and Silver set up housekeeping and, regular basis. I think she probably they would have gotten apart again at some point. I mean, I don't see her there as like all the time. Even if I were writing the book on a regular basis, I don't think I would have kept her around all the time. Because it's not a romance book, and I don't want to just make that something that has to happen every month. But I really, I designed her to be like the perfect woman for him. Again, this is before Catwoman really got, amped up, and so that makes sense as well. But that's a totally different relationship. I mean, between two super beings. I was going to say heroes, but she's not necessarily. But the relationship between two super beings and the relationship between a super being and a regular woman, those are two different dynamics. I mean, and I might well have, in the times when I moved on from Silver, I might well have latched on to Catwoman or Poison Ivy, one of those, as a different way to go. So, all that's totally cool.
Gotcha. Cool. I know, obviously, with your history of DC, you're not going back to writing Batman for DC, but can you go into what you're currently working on? I know that you're been doing indie comics or comics for your own original stuff. I mean,
yeah, I've got a series. I've written 3 issues of it now. I needed 3 issues to kind of like make it make sense, figure out all the angles. And I'm in the process of finding an artist to do that, and then there would have to be a Kickstarter, and unless it goes to IDW or someplace like that. No, all that stuff is unknown to me. I mean, I come from an era when they said, you're writing Batman, we'll get somebody to draw it, don't worry about it. I never had to worry about who was going to draw it or how it was going to get published. So that's, but that's just one of the things. I mean, I've got that superhero series. I did a script for Scorpio Rose, a movie script for Scorpio Rose, a character that I created just because I wanted to. I'm in the position now to kind of do stuff that I want to do. And there was some Hollywood interest in that. I've been around Hollywood long enough to know that interest is cheap, and we'll see if anything comes of it. But, I mean, so I'm doing stuff. But I hesitate to tell this story yet again, but during the pandemic, I wanted to write this really complex series, and I did, a superhero series, but it was long, and I realized only when I got done that nobody's ever going to draw it because it's too long, right? So even though I really enjoyed writing it, it was fun for a writer to work these things out. How is this all going to happen? I thought, well, I should probably do stuff that's more that can be drawn that somebody will want to draw. So yeah, I'm I mean, all of a sudden there were Marvel movies, and so there's residuals and stuff to be had for characters that I did. Not so much with my friends at DC, but I have the ability to find stuff that just seems like it would be fun. Same like doing the Batman story. I want to do the best Batman story I can do. These are like the best stories I can do about these characters that I'm creating. But as I say, the next step, if I'm ever actually going to get them out there, is to find a collaborator and a publisher. Right? So,
Gotcha.
You have a favorite superhero movie?
Ooh.
That's a tough one. I would have to say probably Guardians of the Galaxy, number one.
Ooh,
Oh, wow.
I was going to ask you what you thought of that.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's awesome.
Well, I mean, I had no idea what to expect going into that. If you go to an Avengers movie, I have sort of an idea of what it is I'm going to see, or a Batman movie, or whatever. But I had no idea what they were going to do with Guardians of the Galaxy. And, when he turns on his mixtape and starts dancing across the planet, I'm like, okay, you got me. I'm good for it. And,
Star-Lord's your creation.
Yeah.
Right.
But I became a James Gunn fan at that point.
That's awesome.
Awesome.
Yeah. So, although the Benedict Cumberbatch Doctor Stranges are also pretty good, from my perspective.
Love the first one.
Yeah.
Gunn is also putting Dr. I'm sure you heard about this. He's putting Dr. Phosphorus into that Creature Commandos animated series with Alan Tudyk as the voice of Dr. Phosphorus. So I'm really looking forward to that. And I imagine he has the backstory of what you wrote.
Yeah, I mean, what I wrote is all that I worked out for him. So, if they expand upon him, that would be cool.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
So, I've pretty much asked my questions. Do you have anything else, Andrew?
I guess like at this time, I mean, I know you seem to have like some issues with DC in the past, but but you also like James Gunn. So what are your thoughts on the James Gunn DCU?
Well, sadly, you've opened up another can of worms.
Oh, no, we don't have to do anything you don't want to talk about.
40 years ago, Joe Staten and I created Guy Gardner.
Right. Okay. Oh, okay.
I see where this is going.
And DC's official position is you didn't. Guy Gardner existed before you did. Therefore, we don't have to pay you anything for Guy Gardner. Guy Gardner, you're looking puzzled. Guy Gardner had appeared once in a Green Lantern story, and then twice more, I think, where he was like a vegetable in a mental hospital. And then he didn't show up for a long time. And I just was doing what I considered good comic book stuff by taking this new character that I had and calling him Guy Gardner to kind of make him part of the history, the continuity, et cetera, et cetera. If I had called him Joe Blow, then DC would say, okay, you created that character. But they have the loophole to say, well, no, Gardner Fox and John Broome, it can't be those guys. John Broome and Gil Kane created Guy Gardner, and they're dead. We don't have to pay them, and we're not paying you. And I've been trying, Joe and I both have been trying, ever since we heard that Guy Gardner was going to be in the movie, to get that rectified. And to this point, DC has just stonewalled us completely. I just read an article today about where James Gunn invited all the creators of the characters that he's using to come to the studio. Joe and I did not get an invitation.
Oh, man.
And I assume that's because he asked DC who created Guy Gardner, and they said a couple of dead guys. And so, but yeah, I do hope that works out, because I don't really want to be, raining on James Gunn's parade here. But when people ask me about Green Lantern, or Joe, when they ask Joe about Green Lantern, that comes up, because we do not get any royalties for Guy Gardner.
Okay.
Want to ask me another question?
my last one, it's a break from Batman going to Superman. Did you ever meet Siegel and Schuster?
No, I never did.
You never did. Okay.
I was in New York when Neil Adams was doing his thing for them.
Okay, got it.
And I saw them, the three of them, up on stage at one point somewhere. Okay. But I never actually met them.
Okay.
I've said over the years that you had to move to New York to do comics in those days, because there was no internet and stuff like that. And so, even though I didn't want to stick around New York after I'd been there for a while, I did get to meet like Wally Wood and Bill Everett and people, Will Eisner, people from that previous era. But I never met Siegel and Schuster, though.
Okay. Just wondering.
But it was very cool to meet the people that I did meet, because they were my heroes.
Right. That's awesome.
I guess my last one is, other than Guardians of the Galaxy, the different Marvel movies have kind of gleaned through, obviously, other parts of your Marvel work. So like they kind of tried to do a Nomad thing, sort of, with Captain America.
Right.
So what have your thoughts been on their like little, I guess, mini adaptations of some of your past stuff?
Well, I've the only complaint that I've ever really had was what James Gunn did to Mantis. It's a totally different character. Oddly enough, I do get residuals because they called her Mantis, right? It's all in the name. But I'm not on, I'm not part of the publicity department. And if I have a problem, I say so. That's the only one that I've had. And I said, I wish you had done the character that I spent so much time on rather than this other one. That said, I like Pom Klementieff. I've met her in person. I like the character in the movie. Mm-hmm. I like the movies, right? All of that. Just not, that's a thing that doesn't quite fit. But beyond that, I've been pretty happy with the Marvel movies. The last couple, Ant-Man, I could see what was wrong with it. Hopefully they can see what was wrong with it. The Marvels, Brie Larson couldn't have been less interested in being there, as far as I could tell. So I'm glad that they're pulling back and they're recalibrating and figuring all that out. Because I like comics. I'm probably more of a Marvel guy than a DC. I mean, definitely I'm more of a guy than a DC guy. But, you ask me to do a DC character, I'll do the best I can. I'll try to give you a good Batman. I'll try to give you a good Green Lantern, good Justice League, whatever. So I hope that James Gunn's DC stuff, that he's figured it out. And I would expect that he has. I think that Kevin Feige and those guys have spent some quality time figuring it out.
Hope so.
But again, I'm not involved with any of that stuff. I go to the movies and I see stuff that came from stories that I wrote. And at the end of the movie, I'm one of the 50 million names that goes by for, they're good about acknowledging, Marvel is good about acknowledging, if they use something, then they say so. But they don't consult. I don't know, I don't know any more about what's upcoming than you guys do, probably less. Sure. And I can understand that. I mean, if somebody's trying to write a movie, they don't need me going, well, I would do it differently. Nobody wants that. I don't want that. I wish I'd had a say in the Mantis thing, but there's that. But see, that's a question of like, James Gunn needed a character that fit a certain slot that he had in mind when he was writing it, and he chose to make it Mantis. And as I say, financially, that's good for me. I mean, it's okay. I mean, conversely, the Captain America that's on screen is the Captain America that I basically worked out, and I don't get residuals for that because I didn't create that character. It all makes sense one way or another if you're being above board about it. I've been sort of amazed, starting with Zack Snyder's Justice League, that all of a sudden I'm getting credited at the end of DC movies, the end of the Batman, gave me a thing. I don't know whether they're just sort of crediting everybody who ever did any Batman that they might like.
Right.
Or,
I'm trying to find the connection between that version and...
Well, yeah, that's the thing. I looked, I went through the whole 4 hours of the Justice League, and there was nothing in there where I said, oh, that's mine. But I think he just, he liked what I did on the Justice League, liked what I did on Batman, and gave me credit. Anyway, I hope the whole thing with Guy Gardner works out. But that's to be determined.
We'll put the, obviously this interview is going up, and that'll hopefully help get the word out. We'll see.
Yeah.
So, thank you for coming on. Thank you for your contributions. Thank you for, one of the comic arcs that I've had for many years that have sort of inspired my view on Batman, as well as inspired me to go into, like I told you at WonderCon, go into my own indie comics. So thank you so much. It was an honor to have you on here.
Thanks.
Yes, thank you so much. It was awesome.
And with that is superhero stuff you should know.
And of the episode.
All right, big thanks to Dan for gathering the visuals for the YouTube here. And let's go into a couple announcements. First off, as you can see me wearing, we have some Alter Ego merch.
You got to push this shit, baby.
Got to push my shit. It's on TeePublic. We'll have the link in the descriptions. I myself have picked up my own T-shirt and mug and tote bag. There's no shower curtain this time, but I'm working on it, I guess. If you want some of my characters just peering at you as you take a shower. But yeah, you can check that out, as well as my comic is also in the link below. You can get it on Amazon on both ebook as well as print version, and then there's a print-only version of the variant cover that was done by Alex of the What Mean Podcast, one of our friends of the podcast and patrons. So check out all that type of stuff. And then the other thing to plug is the Batman Blowback. This is the latest audio story that I wrote for Nuverse Creative, who also did the two productions of the Steve Englehart Batman treatments. Blowback is a short story that was originally written by Doug Mensch in the Forensic Files of Batman, and I adapted it for the world of The Batman, where Pattinson's Batman uses forensics in order to take down a hitman who's very clever. So very cool forensic story, uses a lot of like scientific type stuff, detective type stuff that fit that world. So check that out if you haven't already. Cool. Going into the comments. So we are covering comments about the video on Batman, like should Batman kill, should he not kill? So we had a lot of different comments on it. First one comes from Gotham Street Shop saying this episode should just be a 2-second video of them saying no to the camera.
I thought about like making another version of the video after reading this because it's so good.
It's way easier to edit.
Nope. Thanks for watching. Actually, if anybody wants to edit this, here we go. Nope. And thanks for watching.
Perfect.
We'll wait a fan edit. Right. Thank you.
All right. Next, we'll have a... Wait, hold on a second.
Where'd it go?
We're going to go. It disappeared.
Oh, no.
It disappeared. Hold on a second. Oh, yeah. It's still here. Let me pull it back up. And this one comes from The Shadow. I guess The Shadow has his own opinion on Batman killing, saying the only times where Batman should be allowed to kill are some strange, horrible alternate timeline or a remake of the 1939-1940 time period main continuity and most iterations of Batman should not kill. And that comes from the Shadow himself.
This is,
So, thank you.
I gotta say, like the most reasonable take. Like this is about, for my money, this is about as reasonable as you're gonna get.
Yes.
This is very good.
We have a long comment that I'm saving to the end from
Okay.
YouTuber Gaming. So here we go.
Woo!
My gut instinct says no, not merely because of the trauma and not wanting to become what created him, but for sheer pragmatic reasons. So here we go. He's already a vigilante to the GCPD as it stands, and I like to imagine as far as the laws of DC's America is concerned, he's simply doing a combination of citizen's arrest and volunteer consulting. If he killed, well, that makes him judge, jury, and executioner, and unlike Gordon, he's not trained, sworn, and sanctioned by the state for the responsibility or accountability of whether or not to take a life in the interest of public safety. And again, he goes out of his way looking for trouble, not in self-defense. As for where he does kill, like in JSA Liberty Files, it's obvious that Batman hadn't returned to Gotham to become Batman yet. And I'm lenient on the Dawn of Justice interpretation, too. Excuse me. It's clear that his family manors burned down. Robin's death in the Battle of Metropolis, where he was powerless and helpless, it was beyond and beneath the low point in his life if the alcoholism wasn't an additional indicator, and he simply, well, stopped giving a damn anymore. And it made him cold and callous on who was on the receiving end of his justice. Unlike the godlike, untouchable alien godfoe, he was mentally primed to vanquish, made the ultimate sacrifice on behalf of everyone's safety, and carried with him the very weapon that weakened and poisoned him without hesitation. That being said, for his own detective work's sake, and to expand his knowledge, he should still be an expert swordsman, marksman, and the capacity to be a multi-formed killer with few mortal peer. So it's mostly reasonable.
Oh, yeah, it's definitely reasonable. Yeah, I don't really have, I mean, do you have anything, against any of this?
Given what is YouTuber Gaming says earlier about being a vigilante as far as the GCPD stands and allowing him to keep going, there is the thing where it's like he's killed a whole bunch of people in Dawn of Justice, and yet when Gordon meets with him, it's just like, oh, we're buddies. There's not really any ramifications to any of the killing stuff that happens.
This Gordon likes him killing, dude. That's what's happening. So
helps get the job done.
This Gordon's also
Thanks,
a vigilante.
Batman.
Like, you're doing what I've always wanted to do.
Save one for me next time.
This Gordon is using him as a way to kill.
By the way, there's a couple of other guys in that place. If you want some extra ammo,
Yeah.
find it in the storage room.
I'll just leave you a gun. I know this Batman uses guns, so
Yeah.
who gives a fuck?
So, all right. Thank you, YouTuber Gaming. And then that is it. We have our Patreon list.
Oh man, it's been a while since we've actually done this version of the show. We have like a different version of different versions of the show going on at the moment. So,
yeah,
some of the more recent people, man. Let's see. Devin S, Jack G, Put Your Guns On, Michael C, Cyber 6, Tito G, JRP, Brady C. Thank you everybody up on the board. It's awesome that you guys are still here, or most of you, and thank our other supporters as well that aren't on the Patreon. It's patreon.com/superhero-stuff-pod. So check that out. We have the $5 tier is the main one, where you can get hundreds of episodes. Literally, we're over 200 now. So check that out. You could binge it, pay us $5, and then cancel. And then you're done. If you want to binge 200 episodes in a month or whatever, that's always a possibility. So I think that's pretty much it, right?
I think so too.
All right. Thanks, everybody. And, we want you to do us a favor.
We want you to tell all your friends about us.